Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to The Elephant We Don't See, a diversity dialogue. We're thrilled to have you here tonight. We will be discussing the book In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. And tonight I am joined by my esteemed co-worker, Michelle Hamiel, who is the will you tell them your title, Michelle?
I am the Chief Operating Officer for Public Service.
Thank you so much. I know that very well. And Kyla, who is joining us from the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights, our dear friends and collaborators. So if you haven't joined us before, The Elephant We Don't See is a discussion series where Michelle and Kyla talk about equity, diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism with books as a launch point. And we're thrilled to have read and um, to be joining you for a discussion today commemorating Hispanic Heritage Month with this book. So without further ado and further mistakes, I will pass it away to you. Thank you, Michelle.
No mistakes. Oh, thank you for the intro. I do think it's funny that she knows your exact title and not mine. She's only a couple offices down. That's okay. That just means that I am truly a colleague and all she knows is my name. So, and that's what's most important. Thanks. Oh, we are reading that we read this month In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. And this was an extremely interesting read. It's a lot to unpack in this book, and I'm just going to start by reading just a little bit from the cover. It says, prismatic, engrossing, and wildly innovative. In the Dream House is Carmen Maria Machado's account of a relationship gone bad and a bold dissection of the mechanisms and cultural representations of psychological abuse. Machado traces the full arc of a harrowing relationship with a charismatic but volatile woman and struggles to make sense of how what happened to her shaped the person she was becoming. And this is a memoir. And Kyla, I'm going to open up by asking you, why do you think this is entitled In the Dream House?
Um, okay, is this for grades at the end of the program?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Oh, I can't handle it. Okay. So I actually thought that she addressed that sort of early on. So one of the things that goes on throughout the book, those footnotes, where she is footnoting, and I should have written it down. I'm going to now flip through my book to find one, a actual book that I wanted to buy, but it was 7 volumes and they're like $80 a volume. And I've decided that I liked my marriage more than I wanted to buy the book that she is referencing. But it's a Motif index of folk literature by somebody Thompson. And maybe if I can give you, I'll let me put O on the spot. Motif. Okay, go. I need my 2 librarians to find it. Motif Index of Folk Literature. And so throughout the book, what she's doing is she's giving these fairy tale or folk story. I don't want to use trope because trope's kind of got a negative term to it, but let's say devices, literary devices, folk literary devices. And she is showing ways in which her own life, fits those sort of fairy tale, folk tale devices. And so the dream house, she starts off and she says something about, you all know what the dream house is, or you know that it's real. And I just went with that. So for me, it was like this idea of this, well, she says, this house poised on the edge of the forest. So I had it in my head as look at that. Look at that. Oh, it gets a gold star. That's so fast. Okay. So, and I thought there's this sort of, it's real, but it's also surreal. It's a place that we see when we're reading. It's a place that we see in our dreams. It's a place that maybe we wish we lived. And I think for her in this book, there's, I understood it as this construction of the dream house with her partner, her lover, the person that she wanted to have a happy relationship with, really, and how much that becomes the darkness that is in fairy tales that we're so familiar with.
Now, see, I started looking at a dream house in a different way, Kyla, because I thought about just houses in general. And, houses come in many shapes, many sizes. There are many doors, there are many windows, there are many locks. Houses can be beautiful. They can be a place of respite, but it can also be a haunted house. It can be a house of horrors. It can be a dream house, meaning it's everything you ever wanted it to be. And then it could be just a place where you can't even call it home. And I really thought that in this book, what she was unpacking is that there were so many things going on in her life, and that there were many rooms in her home. And there were times when the house was collapsing around her. And I think that there were times when she found peace in her home. And interestingly enough, I think it was those times that she was alone in her home, even though she said she wanted to build this home, this dream home, with her lover. And I also think sometimes in life, you have a dream and you never get to fulfill your dreams.
Yeah.
But you hold it out there because it's always something. There's always that hope. As long as you can hold on to the idea of the dream house, that keeps your sanity. And so I think some of that may have been happening as well for her when she wrote this. There are lots of metaphors in this book. There's just a lot to unpack. And I would say I don't know about you. And you know what? Let's get Miss Vivian out of the way, because I love Miss Vivian. And she's
hi, Miss Vivian.
Question. Hi, Miss Vivian. You know what she's gonna ask? What is the book about? So
that's a good point. We should start with that because not everybody's read it. I guess we are being a bit obscure. So thank you, Miss Vivian, in advance for making us get to the point. Yeah.
It is about a young woman who finds what she believes to be the love of her life. And this person is abusive, but she continues to hang on. And what it reminds me of, without giving too much away, there's sometimes people have this saying that what goes on in our house stays in our house. So that she was dealing with the abuse from this woman, psychological abuse. And then sometimes she only refers to it as psychological, but sometimes it was physical abuse. And she is suffering in silence in her own space. And yet she is holding on to the dream that they're somehow going to be this happy family. They're going to have children and live in her dream house. Go ahead. Are you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, I wanted to just talk about, for me, what was so incredible about this book was I thought it did a incredible, I was going to say wonderful, but maybe that's not the right word, but incredible. I just thought wonderful is a little positive, and I have positive feelings about the writing. I think she did an incredible job, but it is a lot of darkness. And but that said, that's a big lead in for a sentence I haven't finished yet. She did a wonderful job of capturing, I think, what it can feel like for people in a domestic abuse situation. And I thought capturing also how the slide can happen. And there's a part in here, and I took notes, and I'm gonna just give me a moment while I just try to find the page. Okay, page 59. On page 59, I'm also going to read something because I had never thought about this until I read it, but I thought this part right here captures the power of that slide into abuse and powerlessness. So it's page 59. Bluebird's greatest lie was that there was only one rule. The newest wife could do anything she wanted, anything, as long as she didn't do that single arbitrary thing, didn't stick that tiny inconsequential key into that tiny inconsequential lock. But we all know that was just the beginning, a test. She failed and lived to tell the tale, as I have. But even if she'd passed, even if she listened, there would have been some other request, a little larger, a little stronger. And if she'd kept going, kept allowing herself to be trained like a corset fanatic, pinching her waist smaller and smaller, and it goes on and on. But for me, when I got to that part was which, right at the beginning, we all know that was just the beginning, a test. I thought about that, literally as in this tale of Bluebird, and I thought Bluebeard, excuse me. And I was like, I never thought about that. I thought it was just the one rule. But as I'm reading her story and taking this narrative of this chapter, realizing that it would be like that. It's just something little. And I think you see that in her relationship. Just a little chip away at your self-esteem. Just a little chip away. Just a little something. And then it's bigger and bigger and bigger. And I thought her capturing that erosion and the pain and the vulnerability and the powerlessness was incredibly profound. And so important. I think, one of the things we do in our series is we talk about books and like, what do we get out of it? And why do we think what's in it for you as a reader, right? And like, how does it help us become better people? And isn't that our goal as individual? My goal as an individual. And so I think to shine a light on and to so eloquently capture how that erosion occurs was, incredible. That was the thing that I got probably the most out of this, and why I sort of think everybody should read it, especially people who maybe like are challenged to like understand people in unhealthy relationships and like why does she stay? That I thought that this book did a great job of helping us understand like some of that psychology.
And you know what, that I don't remember reading that, but you're right, it is perfect for what was happening to her because she had so many highs. And then it would be that one thing, that inconsequential key in the inconsequential lock. And when that door was opened, it was ugliness behind that door. And she lived that life for so long, always hoping, I guess you would have some type of, every time they got together, because the other thing is it was a long distance relationship at one point. And, it was always this hope that, okay, I can't wait to see her. And then there would be the one thing that happened. The one thing that it doesn't deal with, because clearly this person in the book had mental health issues, clearly. And the book didn't deal with that. And maybe because that was inconsequential for her. It was describing, I guess, I wonder what it is she would want the reader to focus on. Because I know what I focused on was the fact that there was a cycle that she just would not get out of. And I wonder what she would actually have the reader focus on.
So what do you mean by that?
So there's a lot. There's very little talk about her childhood. There's many different metaphors. There's the piece that you picked up on page 59. There is she talks about, let's see, I have here on page 109. This is fantasy is, I think, the defining cliche of female queerness. No wonder we joke about U-Hauls on the second date to find desire, love, everyday joy, without men's accompanying, and she uses a expletive, is a pretty decent working definition of paradise. The literature of queer domestic abuse is lousy, with references to this punctured dream, which proves to be as much a violation of as a black eye, a sprained wrist, even the enduring symbol of queerness. The rainbow is a promise not to repeat an act of supreme violence by a capricious and rageful God. I won't flood the whole world again. It was a one-time thing, I swear. Do you trust me? And later, a threat the next time.
Right.
It'll be fire. And one of the things that struck with me is at the time of this writing, I don't think the word queer was an acceptable term. My understanding from a course that I'm taking is that queer is just coming into acceptance again. And for older people, the word queer is many older people, I won't say all, but many older people, the word queer is almost a curse word. And yet she's using it in this book. And so I don't know there's so much in this book. I don't know what the focus would be. And it's not like with her, a memoir, it starts at whatever point in their life, usually a childhood, and they bring you into their coming of age, or they bring you into where they are currently, whatever the case may be. I'm not seeing that in here. It is, and there's really no sense of time. Like, when is this happening? You know that some things happened when she was in school. You know that there were some things happening when she was a teenager. But I can't find a place to focus other than on this psychological abuse.
Right. Yeah. And I guess that's for me, I found it maybe a little bit easier to access. And then I understood it as a memoir, and I thought it was like such a great way to come at memoir. I'm also like, I love, folk and fair. Oh no, they're over there. I was like, I can show you my collection, but they're on the wrong bookshelves. So you have to just use your imagination. That folk and fairy tales are, such a. I mean, also there's a foundational part of all of our storytelling. From so many hundreds of years ago, and up until present day. So for me, I guess I understood that the tale of the domestic abuse was what that is the story. So it's not a story. I mean, although her graduate school, coincides with this, and we get hints of some things that happened with her parents. I mean, she talks about sort of having moved on from her parents, and we see that she didn't necessarily feel that protected by them at times, and what that means for space, and how that meant about like the safety of her own body and her own space. So she gives us this kind of images of that we can sort of use to hold on to help us kind of orient where we are, what is happening to her. And so one of the things that I'll say resonated for me, I'll just speak frankly, is that as a fat woman, reading her talk about her size and her fatness and how that related to being loved. I mean, let me see if I can find them. So she has, this is just going to be like read aloud. Let's read aloud story time here with Michelle and Kyla. Page 24. Part of the problem was, as a weird fat girl, you felt lucky. She did what you'd wish a million others had done, looked past arbitrary markers of social currency and seen your brace and ferocious talent and quick wit and pugnacious approach to not nice people, but she uses a different word. So when you started writing about fatness a long time ago in your live journal, a commentator said to you that you were pretty and smart and charming, but as long as you were Zaftig, you'd never have your choice of lovers. You remember feeling outraged and then processing the reality, the practicality of what he'd said. You were so angry at the world. And then there's another part. I mean, you sort of see this throughout the story where she talks about her size, how she feels about her size, and also, frankly, how other people and the world treat her about her size. And how much there's this kind of, what did she say? She has this line here. So sorry that you have to wait for me. Oh, page 213, where she says, again, going back to the relationship, was it the arc of the universe, the natural result of centuries, millennia of wrong-headed politics? Was she trained to find you, or were you trained to be found? Was it the fact that you'd already been tenderized like a pork chop by never having been properly in love, being told you should be grateful for anything you get as a fat woman? And so I think that, I'm not unfamiliar with with those feelings, and also the implication of those feelings on relationships. And as a reader, then I try and look at, okay, what am I learning from this in terms of like, how am I better relating to other people? And I think some of that just goes back to the sensitivity of what people I think it's sort of what I said before. What is it that, if you have a friend or someone that you hear about that's in a relationship that seems really unhealthy to you, and you're like, why do you let that person speak to you like that? And sort of, I thought that this book did a really good job of taking us through how emotionally, and also like how emotionally trapped, like, you know what I mean? Like you're trying to appease the person, you want to be accepted again. I worked, I think I can say this, it's been enough years. I worked for a long time at Indiana Legal Services. I was a volunteer. I did, intake. And I remember somebody called, and I took her call, and she had a case with us, and she wanted to cancel her case. And so I just, I needed to give notes for the attorney, like, why did she want to cancel her case? And she said that her husband had come to where she worked, and he'd beaten the living daylights out of her. And she sort of gave it some thought. And then she said, I just think I'm going to try to make it work. And I remember in my ignorance at that time of getting that phone call, of just being like, what the heck is, I didn't say this. I think I behaved well, but my inside voice was really perplexed. And as life has gone on, I've gotten a few more decades underneath me now. And I think this book does a good job of hinting at this, that, in her case, this is not somebody who is staying because she, wanted abuse, but sometimes when we stay because that is how we can control it. When you're in the relationship, you have the capacity, you can kind of like, I'm from Canada, and we like to curl. Okay. So for those of you who don't know what curling is, you have a big stone, you throw it down the ice, you get in front of it, you sweep, you fall. And sometimes you get to go to the Olympics. That's it. I've just summarized the entire sport. So in this relationship, when she stayed, that when you're inside it, you can sweep the ice in front of the stone. You have some kind of control. When you're outside of the relationship, as the woman I'm talking about was, she had no control. So she was just victimized by this person over and over again. But by getting back, she could kind of like maybe manage his moods, maybe just it's almost like a way of maintaining your own control. And I thought that in this book, you just see times of that. Like, if she could only appease the person, she would have some kind of control over the situation.
I in listening to you talk about that, I'm wondering if the dream house was used, because in a house with many different rooms, each room in some cases has its own personality. And I think that maybe you just helped me with something. One, because I turned to page 110 and it's dream house as inventory. But I'm wondering if what she was actually trying to do is to allow the reader to find the thing that resonates with them. Because essentially, if you're telling folk tales, or you find the thing in the story that resonates with you. And if it is a compilation of stories, you find the story that changes your life. And so maybe that's what she was doing. And that with every chapter of the book, she unpacks something else, but it allows the reader to let whatever it is in the book sit with them. She allows the tale that is being told at the time to find a space in the house.
So like the chapters of the many rooms of the house, so the
house.
individual chapters. That's brilliant. Yeah. Okay, you get an A.
Oh, thank you.
No, but that is a really beautiful way to see it. That this is the dream house, and each chapter, which are very short for people who haven't read it yet. They're 1 or 2 pages for each sort of essay or chapter, and that if we see them as the many different rooms in the house, that is brilliant.
That's what happens when I go on vacation. I have a little bit of something there.
No, it's really it's. And I think that for you, my impression is I'm gonna sort of paraphrase a little bit of what I've heard you say, and you can correct me if I've misunderstood. That for you, this was like not necessarily a book that you found it totally easy to get into or to understand what was happening. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so having those places, like you use the example of Dream House's inventory, that was a way you're like, okay, I can understand. This gives me something to kind of sink my teeth into. Is that sort of how you felt that?
So as I was reading it, I thought, what is going on? Because it was very disjointed for me. Like I said, I'm reading a memoir. I wanted to start at point A and end at point B. And you can't tell that in this book. But if you're moving through a house, you might be in the bedroom, then you might be in the living room, then you might be in the kitchen, So I never wanted to put it down. It wasn't resonating with me. But maybe because I have not lived in that situation. And yes, I had empathy for Machado. I understand that there are thousands upon thousands of men and women in abusive relationships. And I've read other books that made me want to do something. This didn't make me necessarily want to do something. This was, and now, like I said, I think she was saying, I'm going to tell my truth. I'm going to let it exist in whatever way it sits with you. And if it can transform someone's life, then this book has done its job. Because I really do believe that one of the reasons, and I'm saying I believe like I talked to her, but I think she's telling the story in this way so that it can touch somebody, and hopefully someone will recognize themselves in this and feel like there's some hope to get out.
Right. You are not alone. You are not alone. And I think that was not the critical, I think that's the critical maybe message under all writing, or, is that you are not alone, that there's some, that you're seen, that, there's this, we talk about this in some of the books we've done, and I know in some of the other events that our office, the Office of Human Rights, has had the pleasure to do with the library. We've talked about people sort of, writing yourself into existence. And so I think in this book, she's done this in multiple ways from my point of view. So there's, what is it? How do you write yourself into existence as the victim of domestic abuse? And, that's, she addresses this in her book, the minimization of people. It was really not that bad. That person seems really lovely. I think you probably misinterpreted it. The dismissing of her own experience, and I think the collective experience of so many people who have been in those situations. So she is writing that into existence, the survivors of those, the survivors of domestic abuse, or those currently living in it. She is writing their stories into existence. And the other thing that I think is a critical piece that she's doing here, and using her language, like writing queer abuse, abuse between lesbians into existence. And a lot of what she talks about, well, not a lot, but she certainly talks several different times throughout the book about how difficult it was for her to access stories and accounts of same-sex domestic abuse, that those it was just not in the sort of narrative. And those, she does go into many reasons I think that she looked at about why that might be, but also how painful it was then to be alone in that way. And so I understood this as her writing these stories and herself into existence, and in so doing, like, writing other people, so survivors of domestic violence, people in same-sex abusive relationships, that they know that they're not alone. And I think that is a critical mission, really. And I don't know if she sat down to be like, I want other people to know they're not alone, or she just sat down because she needs to tell her story. But I do think the outcome of putting her work into the world, that, she puts it in somewhere in here, but at some point, she's going to be dead, and the person in the woman in the dream house is going to be dead, and her wife's going to be dead, and her parents are going to be dead, and the people who are part of the story will be dead. But you know what? We'll still be here. And she didn't put that in the book, but when I read that part, I was like, but something else is still going to be here. And so, 50 years from now, or 60 years from now, or 70 years from now, people will still be able to see themselves reflected.
The other thing that I got, I felt that this was almost like a journal, her journal. And I would imagine that if over time she had been keeping a journal, what was happening in her life, it is disjointed for someone who just picked it up and started reading it. But for her, she probably could see her growth in this. You could probably see her pain when that pain got worse. So it almost has that little feel, because it is in some pages, pages, they're just a few lines on a page. And, if you, at least if you look at my journal, you might find just one or two words on a page. So it also gives me that feel that this was her journal, that she decided, okay, I need to put it in some sort of a semblance so that someone would want to read it. But it was just snippets. It didn't, like, again, not your typical memoir, I don't think. And I'm just going to read this one. Dream House as Tragedy of the Commons. She is always trying to win. You want to say to her, we cannot advance together if you are like this. Love cannot be won or lost. A relationship doesn't have a scoring system. We are partners paired against the world. We cannot succeed if we are at odds with each other. Instead, you say, why don't you understand? Don't you understand? You do understand. Then what don't I understand? To me, that is as if she were writing in a journal, and she's trying to reconcile something with herself. She is trying to figure out, the best of relationships, and then comparing of what a relationship is supposed to be, and then what hers is. And she even has this dialogue of what would happen between she and her partner, and that's the end of it. That is the next chapter. Dream House as an epiphany. So for me, if this were a journal, okay, so did that statement then have that epiphany? Because it just says most types of domestic abuse are completely legal. So again, nothing related, in reading it. Dream House is Tragedy of Commons. It ends, it's a thought. You turn the page, Dream House as epiphany. And I'm thinking, this is her aha moment. This is it. She's getting it. And all it says is most types of domestic abuse are completely legal. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, so for me, when I got to that part, I got it as something for us to think about as readers, right? Like, okay, so this is what people live with, and like,
Mm-hmm.
where is the law? And you know, what happens? I mean, we know. I mean, there's thousands of stories, and you probably heard them from people that you know personally, of people trying to get the law, trying to help, and what is their experience? You know, even walking into a police station. What is their experience trying to find a shelter? Let's say they needed a shelter, and you know, it's not. There's a lot of negative stories, and so for me, reading that, it's also realizing like what, you know, the lack of protection for somebody. And our friend Susan Roberts, we had a comment up on here earlier that O put up, and I thought it was wonderful. And first of all, it's great to see you again, Susan. But this part, the slow erosion into abusive relationship, is frightening. Um, and and I think that part, you know, as this the line that you use, Michelle, that you read about, is completely legal, so that people can be so eroded,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and there are no protections. And when you're eroded, you know, your self esteem is so eroded. You know, how are you able to claw your way back from that? I think for those of us, if we are not feeling eroded, you know, feeling pretty confident, our partners can maybe break our hearts, you know, like they could hurt us if they
Right.
decided they didn't want to be, you know, with us anymore. And that could be, you know, we could be very sad. But that your life or your job or your home, that these things are not at risk. Whereas I felt like with her, we could see like her sanity sort of being at risk, like her the gaslighting, and she talks about gaslighting a lot in
Yes.
this, like
Mm-hmm.
that you just start to doubt your own sanity. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we could see this with her friends kind of piling on it. A couple, I mean, she had very supportive friends at some points, but also the parts where her friends were like, oh, she seems really nice, oh, she's really not that bad, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I want to draw everyone's attention to the fact that O is putting into the chat some resources as it relates to domestic violence. There's some, Prince George's County has put together a brochure, a PDF brochure that is on the screen right now, but I believe it's also in your chat boxes wherever you're viewing. And so if you live locally and there's any resources that you'd like to access, please do click that link, save it someplace. And there's also another link that we put up that is to a hotline, and that site is great. They do have an emergency warning right away saying that, you know, your internet activity can be tracked. But if you're able to use, if you need it and you're able to use a private viewing, or, you know, incognito viewing, that you may want to save, bookmark these if you're somebody who may need to get access to a little bit of help and resources.
Yes.
So
Yes.
thank you, O, for getting those up and putting them on the chats.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh yeah, doubting. Yes. So we have another comment about somebody doubting her sense of reality, and I think that's the insidiousness of this relationship. That
Mm-hmm.
the abuser has so much power. I mean, how did you feel reading the stuff about gaslighting? Are you familiar with that term and that film? Like, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my favorite movies too.
So I haven't seen the movie, but I feel like I've seen it because I've heard enough about it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about it so people who are watching know what this term is?
So it's really when someone else is making you think you are crazy. And they play with your mind. Um, you know, in the movie Gaslight, a wonderful woman married to what she thought was a wonderful man. And essentially, he's trying to drive her crazy. And he's doing things to her to make her think she is crazy. And there is nothing anybody, because she believes in this man. Um, and you know, and there is she gets rescued, but the I think that, and again, this is me, and I don't want to walk in anyone else's shoes, but I think that if you are being abused and there are these moments when this person um, makes you feel like the last time that happened didn't really happen. It was something, because from things that I've read, it was something that you did that caused this person to do this, or you imagined it, or it was because maybe the person was drinking. Um, it's playing with your mind, and so you're always at that point where no, it really can't be them. It may be me. It may be some other outside entity that's causing this to happen, and you keep giving them chance after chance, and that's really where she was. It was the next time it's going to be better. The next time this won't happen. And again, it's about her self-esteem and Machado's self-esteem. She didn't feel good about who she was. And she finally had someone to love her. And so let's put up with some of this just so that I too can be loved. And this woman was just playing with her mind. One minute she was the best thing since sliced bread, the love of her life. Because when they I don't like talking too much about the book. When they first meet, she simply says, okay, we're not going to have a relationship. I'm not monogamous, so we're not going to have a relationship. And then she just one day decides, I love you. Can you imagine when you've never felt good about yourself and you were perfectly happy accepting the relationship that this woman defined for you? And then she says she loves you. And then you meet the stranger. Because she hadn't met that side of her until that point. They're in a relationship, and then all of a sudden, she's gaslighted,
right?
Because this is not who she met. Right. And then the sweet person that she did meet comes back into her life.
And one of the things that happened in terms of the gaslighting was the woman in the dream house, as she's referred to. The woman in the dream house would do bad things, and then when Carmen went to talk to her about it later, or that really hurt me when this happened, the woman would say, well, that didn't happen, or I don't remember that, I don't think that happened, and so that there isn't even any ability to kind of engage and like talk through issues, because really in this relationship, and I think this is not untypical, right? This is not an untypical pattern where Carmen, the survivor in this case, has issues, but the perpetrator, her at this point, the woman in the dream house doesn't. The woman in the dream house is fine. It's Carmen who has problems. Carmen who has low self-esteem. Carmen who's a snob. Carmen who's lazy. Carmen who whatever. And that is just an untenable situation. And yet I think the book does such a good job of, and just showing how, because again, it starts off in this super hot, like fun relationship that she's all, I mean, it wasn't like as you just said, it wasn't like the woman showed the darkness to start with. I mean, they were fairly far down the path when that started coming up. I just will cut myself off to say that it is 7:45. And if there's any questions from people who are viewing, this is a really great time to type them in the chat, and we will try to answer them as best we can. Try not to ask us any really hard ones.
I will say, Kyla, I just noticed this. It does say right in the beginning of the book, if you need this book, it is for you. It does say that.
Yeah.
And you never know how something's going to strike someone.
Right. And I saw that, and I loved. I saw it before I read it. I was like, okay. And then when I got to the end, I really, really just loved that opener. I certainly encourage people. I mean, I know. I always say we're not supposed to review them, but then I always end up saying, I think everybody should read this. I definitely think this is one. I thought it was beautifully written. It's evocative. It's creative. It's unusual.
It is unusual, and that and maybe that for me, that's why I wanted to continue reading it. It is not just for the topic, and the fact that I like bios and I like memoirs. I just and I mainly like nonfiction, but it's unusually written, and even though it was not something that I could just dive into, I didn't want to stop reading it. And it's a quick read. It is a quick read. But there are going to be some things in it to make you go back and say, okay, what is she talking about? And you may have to reread it a couple of times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I will say that it is a story of a particular relationship, and
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was looking at the you know I sort of said this before, but I'll just repeat it, which is this like two really important narratives that I don't think we see a lot of from the point of view of the victim, which
Mm-hmm.
is we don't see that where the person who's experienced the abuse is telling the story and owning the story and is written and is writing themselves into existence and is present. So
Mm-hmm.
that voice and that experience. And one of the things that I really liked about it too is that, you know, it wasn't all um she unpacked difficult parts of herself too.
Yes.
And I valued that so much. She has a part in here, and well, actually, I almost feel like I can't read it out loud because I feel like without context, it's gonna, you know, you need the context to understand. So,
Yeah.
so hold that thought, read the book, and send me an email. And I'll tell you what. But I think that's the thing is like talking about some thoughts that she has that are, you know, probably not socially acceptable thoughts, but we understand, you know, how she can, and she talks about like how she can be so kind of twisted and broken through
Mm-hmm.
this situation. And that part, and then again, you know, talking about her relationship as a lesbian with this woman, or I mean, she uses that term, although she also has some male partners, but just recognizing this love affair between two women and how problematic this particular relationship is and how invisible domestic abuse between two women has been in her
Mm-hmm.
world. And I think that that's, you know, she has a part in there where she talks about like, and several different parts, but she talks about like affording people who are in minorities full humanity. So so she's saying, you know, like as an LGBT person, uh, to be fully human means we get to be human, including sometimes sometimes people get divorced, just like other humans, you know. And I thought that was an important message too, because one of the things that she talks about, and I've seen it myself, which is this idea that if something goes wrong in an LGBTQ relationship, then somehow like mainstream society will use that and be like, oh, those people are bad. That's why those relationships are bad. Whereas those same exact problems and exact things are
Mm-hmm.
happening in heterosexual relationships every single day.
Yep.
And so I thought it was really important that she drove home this point that like, you know, LGBTQ folks get to have their full humanity just like everybody else. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, for me, there was just value in seeing these messages written out for the reader to like really drive them home. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um,
I wonder if there's any, and I'm sure there is, if there's any research on how often, um, if the police had to show up at a home of a lesbian couple, would they ignore the cry for
mhm,
help?
mhm. Well, I think that happens in heterosexual couples, so I'm sure that it happens in same-sex couples.
Well, I
I,
think for heterosexual couples, it is the woman more often. It is the woman is right, and um, I don't know how often it is assumed that the man was the victim.
mhm,
You know, it is. I don't know. I think that there isn't enough attention paid to domestic violence.
mhm, mhm. So, um, do you feel? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but this is part of what we do. How do you feel like there's anything that you know, you've read this, that you feel like, okay, this is somehow going to inform me going forward? Did you get that kind of takeaway from this?
No,
Okay.
I did not. Um, no,
So would you recommend it to
I,
people if
I,
they
I
wanted to
think
like go
so.
ahead?
I get the impression that this was healing for her. that she wrote this so that she could heal. Um, and I'm sure your next question was, who would I recommend this to? I think if there was anyone who may be suffering in a violent, abusive relationship, they weren't quite ready to get out, because they were afraid to get out. I think I could recommend that. I don't know that it would give them the courage to get out, which is what I would be looking to give them. Something that would give them courage. But if anything, this is letting them know that you're not alone, that other people have suffered, are still suffering, and that there's still some hope if they get to the end of the book. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, well, so I really enjoyed it though as a book, like as a piece of writing. I liked the I think some of the things that for you were maybe made it difficult to like engage were things that I was like, oh wow, look at this, really neat, you know. So I think that there's that that part of it, like just that it's such a sort of beautifully woven narrative. I definitely think I'm not sure if I would give it to somebody that I knew was in a difficult situation.
Okay.
Actually, because I think it can be super potentially like really triggering and upsetting. But I think it might be one of those things where I do the kind of like not totally upfront way of talking to somebody, which is I just read this book and oh my gosh, and this is what I thought about it. It was like just that I'm not necessarily talking to you about you, like I'm trying to tell you that you need something in your life, but just because you're my buddy and we're drinking coffee and oh, by the way, what have you been reading lately? Well, I just read this book. Like I can see that's like my sneaky side coming out, but I can maybe imagine that. But I would certainly want to preface it with the fact that it could be pretty challenging, but like but also maybe sharing like what was it that I liked about it. But I was just sort of wondering just in general, because I was thinking to me as a reader, I had sort of found it like helpful just it provides a window into someone's experience, and it may be experience that I'm familiar with. It may not be experience that I'm familiar with. If it's not an experience that I'm familiar with, then it provides a window into like, what was this experience like for one person? You know, obviously she's not going to speak for everybody, but it helps me see, oh man, okay, like that slide and how did that happen? And how does this erosion happen? And how hard is it to like kind of reclaim yourself? You know, what is it? There's a scene in it where she's, you know, hiding in the bathroom and carrying the bathroom crying. And like, what does it take, you know, metaphorically to go from, you know, crying in the bathroom behind a locked door, kind of curled up in a ball to, you know, be standing on the shore of an ocean in all the beauty and splendor that is yourself and that is the world. And so to me, that this book seems like an invitation to all of us to take that journey. And so that's, you know, I guess I would recommend, I mean, I would recommend it to people, a bit acknowledging that it's not an easy read or like a light read, let's say, but hopefully it gives us some understanding about the human condition, you know, which I'm always trying to do. I'm always trying to figure out like what I like to think about what is going on with other people and to try to have, some compassion or some empathy. I think because I'm constantly trying to make up for the fact that I'm naturally kind of a jerk. And so I have to work at it all the time. But that this is a great, for me, this was a great way to have that understanding, you know?
And generally I am empathetic. And I cry very easily. I just didn't connect with her. You know, I just didn't connect with her.
No.
I didn't have any feelings about her really. Other than, you know, my thought is your partner is mentally ill. there's something else going on there, and you aren't addressing that. That doesn't get addressed, and maybe that didn't matter because she was being abused. And I guess if anybody is being abused, the abuser probably does have some mental health issues. Um, just haven't been named. I don't know. But it was really that I almost had more feelings for the abuser because it's almost like get some help, get some help. And why is nobody saying anything to her? Like when in that scene where there's a party, I can't remember where they are, but and she leaves, and someone at the party gives her money to get a cab. Clearly, and the person apologized to her, and so clearly they've seen this behavior before. Why doesn't somebody address it? Why isn't somebody telling her you need to get help? And maybe they did. I mean, because that's not part of the book, but I thought more about she needs help than I did anything else.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's so I will say this. I think it was I really appreciated the opportunity to read a book that takes us on. I thought it was it was different from what we've done before, but for me it was really a great opportunity. So I appreciated it. As you can hear, I think we are kind of running out of time, everybody, but it has mixed reviews, but I think you've hopefully gotten a pretty good idea of the story and like what it brings and what we both think that it's trying to do. Michelle, did you want to say anything else on that, or should I just wrap up?
No, you can wrap up.
I'll wrap up.
Just remember, I think that people need to remember that it says, if you need this book, then it is for you. So right. I recommend reading it. Right. It may be for you.
Right. And if it is, then you have it. And remember to check out the links that O has been putting in the chats, because those are all really important. So we have a couple of things I want to tell you about. First of all, for this series, Elephant We Don't See, Diversity Dialogue, at the very end of October, we are going to be reading this book. We have always been here. I will say the author is Canadian. So we're really, really excited about that one. So that is the last Tuesday of October. Please join us. We have always been here. Hope you can read the book and join us. We have a bunch of events coming up. I know O has been putting links to where you can see those in the chat boxes. So you can visit the library at pgcmls.info/events. You can also visit them for a virtual or a real library card. Virtual library card is real. A hard library card. You can also visit our event webpage, tinyurl.com/PGCOHR events. But the big thing I do want to let everybody know is that on October 6th, we are absolutely delighted, Office of Human Rights and the library together, to be welcoming labor leader, civil rights icon, Dolores Huerta, in conversation with County Executive Angela Alston-Brooks. This is just a massive, extraordinary event. We are delighted that she is willing to come and speak with us. She's in California. She's going to join us virtually at 7:00. You can, of course, always watch that event here on YouTube, but there's also, I did give you no warning for this. There is an Eventbrite link that we may be able to get in the chat before we end here, but I did not give any warning this is coming. So just check out our events webpage. You'll be able to find that event. There we go. Thank you so much. And you've done an absolutely fantastic job backstage as always.
Always amazing.
Yeah. Thank you to the library. Thank you to Michelle. And thank you to all of you for tuning in with us tonight. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you all. Have a good night.